I walked from work today. A man slapped a woman in the street. I was very sorry.
I'm sad too. Why are people not respectful?
People should respect each other. It must be respectful.
I don't want to be as her.
There is an association in this city.
What is its name?
Tokyo Economic Development and Vocational Training Association.
What does it do?
They do Erasmus projects. They have projects called SHE. They are dealing with domestic violence.
This is wonderful.
I met with Mr. Kekmas today. He said that domestic violence and its forms domestic violence, also named domestic abuse or family violence, is violence or other abuse in a domestic setting, such as in marriage or cohabitation. Domestic violence is often used as a synonym for intimate partner violence, which is committed by one of the people in an intimate relationship against the other person, and can take place in heterosexual or same-sex relationships, or between former spouses or partners. In its broadest sense, domestic violence also involves violence against children, teenagers, parents, or the elderly. It takes multiple forms, including physical, verbal, emotional, economic, religious, reproductive, and sexual abuse, which can range from subtle, coercive forms to marital rape and to violent physical abuse such as choking, beating, female genital mutilation, and acid throwing that results in disfigurement or death. Domestic murders include stoning, bride burning, honor killing, and dowry death, which sometimes involve non-cohabitating family members. Domestic violence often occurs when the abuser believes that abuse is an entitlement, acceptable, justified, or unlikely to be reported. Many people do not recognize themselves as abusers or victims because they may consider their experiences as family conflicts that got out of control. Awareness, perception, definition and documentation of domestic violence differs widely from country to country. Domestic violence often happens in the context of forced or child marriage. Forms: not all domestic violence is equivalent. Differences in frequency, severity, purpose, and outcome are all significant. Domestic violence can take many forms, including physical aggression or assault, hitting, kicking, biting, shoving, restraining, slapping, throwing objects, beating up, etc., or threats thereof. Sexual abuse, controlling or domineering, intimidation, stalking, passive/covert abuse, for example, neglect, and economic deprivation. It can also mean endangerment, criminal coercion, kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, trespassing, and harassment. Physical abuses that involving contact intended to cause fear, pain, injury, other physical suffering or bodily harm. In the context of coercive control, physical abuse is to control the victim. The dynamics of physical abuse in a relationship are often complex. Physical violence can be the culmination of a abusive behavior, such as threats, intimidation, and restriction of victim self-determination through isolation, manipulation and other limitations of personal freedom. Denying medical care, sleep deprivation, and forced drug or alcohol use are also forms of physical abuse. It can also include inflicting physical injury onto other targets, such as children or pets, in order to cause emotional harm to the victim. Homicide as a result of domestic violence. Acid attacks are an extreme form of violence in which acid is thrown at the victims, usually their faces, resulting in extensive damage including long-term blindness and permanent scarring. These are commonly a form of revenge against a woman for rejecting a marriage proposal or sexual advance. In the Middle East and other parts of the world, planned domestic homicides, or honor killings, are carried out due to the belief of the perpetrators that the victim has brought dishonor upon the family or community.
That is good activities.
Honor killings are generally performed against women for refusing to enter into an arranged marriage, being the victim of a sexual assault, seeking a divorce, or being accused of committing adultery. Sexual abuse. Asexual abuse is any sexual act, attempt to obtain a sexual act, unwanted sexual comments or advances, or acts to traffic, or otherwise directed, against a person's sexuality using coercion. It also includes female genital mutilation. Emotional abuse, or psychological abuse, is a pattern of behavior that threatens, intimidates, dehumanizes or systematically undermines self-worth. Emotional abuse includes minimizing, threats, isolation, public humiliation, unrelenting criticism, constant personal devaluation, coercive control, Repeated stonewalling and gaslighting stalking is a common form of psychological intimidation, and is most often perpetrated by former or current intimate partners for coercive control. It is a controlling behavior that's designed to make a person dependent by isolating them from support, exploiting them of independence, and regulating their everyday behavior. It involves acts of verbal assault, punish, humiliation, threats or intimidation. Economic abuse or financial abuse is a form of abuse when one intimate partner has control over the other partner's access to economic resources. Economic abuse diminishes the victim's capacity to support themselves, increasing dependence on the perpetrator, including reduced access to education, employment and career advancement.
Perfect.
They social workers for good society.